over the last 3 decades, I would say we have evolved. We have evolved in ablative surgery, and we have also evolved in plastic surgery. In ablative surgery, we've had a tendency to always resect less and less and less and less, because we had all these clinical trials showing that this was a safe procedure to do. The same thing for skin. While in the beginning we thought that we had to remove a lot of skin, I think there's still a number of surgeons, or in my country, gynecologists, who think that even if the skin is not involved, that they have to remove all the skin that's over it. But actually that's not necessary. So also, considering skin, we've always been doing less and less, and now we move to skin-sparing mastectomies or doing tumorectomies, quadrantectomies, with preserving the skin, if possible, obviously. It's not always possible, I do agree. But also in the meantime, plastic surgery has evolved as well. We moved from myocutaneous flaps to perforator flaps, and I've listed a number of them here, all in the region or the vicinity of the breast that you can use. And they're all great flaps, and as you know, I've been very much involved with the development of many of those flaps, and we've all written them up in our book. But unfortunately, there's a new player on the field. It's called lipofilling. One of the first things I always thought when we developed the deep flap was that one day during my career, we probably would step away from flaps. And I think for this particular reason, in breast conservative surgery, this is probably the case, where we now actually are moving away from flaps and going to lipofilling alone. Now, if you look at which technique you need to choose to reconstruct the breast after breast conservative surgery, it really depends on the volume of the tumor and the volume, or the volume of the tumorectomy actually, and the volume of the breast. If it's small tumors that you remove in a large breast, you can use glandular flaps to fill up the volume. If you do it in a secondary phase, you can easily use lipofilling. Why? Because it just affects the conus. It does not affect the envelope, the skin. The same goes for slightly bigger resections. You might need local regional flaps. Once again, we have evolved to less skin resection. So if the envelope is not affected, there's actually nothing that you need to do to the skin, and you don't have to introduce a flap with a skin paddle to it. It's more than enough to use only lipofilling to fill up the conus. Now, if it's more than 3/8 of the breast, then obviously you need to move ahead with a mastectomy and a full breast reconstruction. It doesn't make sense to reconstruct an irradiated breast where half of the breast is gone. So like I said, you know, less skin is removed, there's less need for local regional flaps. So what we used to do, and these are slides that you probably have seen already, these are typical slides that we used to do 10, 15 years ago. Typical quadrantectomy, there's no skin removed here. This is the only incision that has been done. Well, with a Tdap flap that is localized on the back, you can move that forward. Here's the Tdap flap. You can introduce it into the pocket, and it gives you a good result. The problem only is if you do this in a primary situation and you need radiotherapy, like in this case here, you can see actually that a lot of fat, also fat of the flap, but also fat around the flap has diminished in volume just because of the radiation. And what do you need to do for that? Lipofilling. Now, these days, probably won't do any flaps anymore, just do lipofilling. Another example here, a lesion or deformity in the upper quadrants of the breast. Here's an example of a lateral intercostal perforated flap. Great flap, easy to do, not very difficult, gives great volumes in one go, but you have this scar, and although it's positioned in into the bra line, it still is and remains a scar. So what we do now is actually, if the envelope is not affected, and even if there's small deficiencies of the envelope, we will just do lipofilling. These lesions here in the upper quadrants are very hard to reconstruct with flaps, and anyway, those benefit from pure lipofilling in that area. As you all know, it doesn't only improve the volume, but it also improves the quality of the skin, the color, the elasticity, and so on. So, and then with slightly larger lesions also in the lateral part here that create retractions, instead of doing a flap in there, you can easily just do lipofilling. Just do with subcisions, just release the scar, and everything will come into place. The nipple shifts back into its original position in cases where not too much skin has been removed. You can combine two. This is a tumorectomy, together with an autologous augmentation. So this is combining filling of the defect with lipofilling augmentation. Here's a typical case of a larger lesion in the lateral part of the breast here, where you can see that, and this is the problem with pictures, obviously you can't feel it, but this is rock hard. It's contracted, there's problems with mobility with the pectoral muscle, and it's very painful for the patient. So this is her result after 2 sessions. The nipple moves back, the quality of the skin is better, you have your volume back. It's not perfect yet, but you have not done any incisional surgery, so that's really important. Very specific is that pain disappears completely, the mobility returns completely as well. Here, again, larger defect here, and just 1 session of lipofilling. Question here, there's no perfect symmetry in this case. The question is, what does the patient want? In her case, she was happy with this result. She didn't want to go on. You can do a 2nd session if you want to, but it's not really absolutely necessary. Now, also think about the contralateral side. Don't try to fill up that affected or that operated side with lipofilling only. You can do a combination of both. You can just do lipofilling like this case here on the side to improve the shape and the position of the nipple, and at the same time do a mastopexy just to get the nipple in a symmetrical position. And then this is just a case, an example of where half of the breast actually has been removed, irradiated. Does not make any sense to hold on to that. Just remove the remaining gland. Oncologically, it's going to be safer because you have removed all this tissue at risk. And at the same time, you can use the skin as your skin envelope to create a beautiful shape with a deep flap. So I think with the advent of lipofilling, we're doing less surgical remodeling, which I mean is no flaps, no surgical interventions, rotating or derotating the flap. And also, you've been using lipofilling to compensate for volume deficiencies or augmentations on the contralateral side. So in conclusion, these days I don't really see a lot of indications. Actually, it's been a very long time that I've done a thoracic flap or a pedicle perforated flap around the breast to fill up a defect of the breast. The only exception is if you need volume and you need a skin paddle to recreate the envelope, then you might need a pedicle flap. But once again, if a patient has a tumor that grows into the skin and is large and you need to remove a large part of the skin, you might want to consider doing a mastectomy and a complete reconstruction in one go. Probably that's going to be better from an oncological point of view and from an aesthetical point of view. Do it in a secondary setting because you're going to have to irradiate whatever you've done. If you do a primary flap or you do a primary lipofilling, it will be irradiated and it will suffer. So do your reconstruction in a secondary session. Multiple lipofilling sessions are safe oncologically and provide sufficient volume to even regenerate or recreate the entire breast if you'd like to do so with the principle of reversed expansion. And then if you need larger skin paddles, you can either do a small flap or consider